Okay, next, going into a little bit about transparency. Typically, if I were to take a paintbrush and I were to select black, so first of all, let me change this to a 2-column toolbar so you can see it a little better. And I do have black as my default color, my foreground color in here. I'm selecting my paintbrush tool, making it a little bit larger, and I am on the yellow square layer, which is now going to be called Yellow Square Shadow. But notice what happens when I start painting. I'm painting over the entire layer. Now let me turn the visibility off on this top one so you can see that I'm just covering up this layer. Something that's kind of neat that a lot of people don't take advantage of is this. I'm pressing Command Z, and I am pressing now my question mark backslash key. And you'll notice, look up here, that when I press my backslash or question mark key, one and the same, that my lock transparency icon appears. And now when I paint, I can't get out of the lines. It's a pretty cool thing to use. What you will notice, though, if you do lock your transparency, first of all, it's great because it will not allow any paint to adhere where your layer is transparent. But that also means that if you choose to go blur something, no matter how much you decide to blur, it will not blur. And the reason why is because you are not allowing your transparent pixels to mix with your colored pixels. I am going to cancel this and show you another method for doing this. Now I am pressing the backslash or question mark key again to turn that off. This time I'm pressing Shift Delete. If you plan on filling an entire item in with a solid color and you don't want to make a selection, you want to strictly do this based upon the transparency that's already there, you can also choose Preserve Transparency when you fill. Now you could do Edit Fill to get this dialog box or Shift Delete. I'm going to choose to fill with black and click OK, and that filled in my square. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the visibility of the yellow square top. I still have the yellow square shadow selected, but this time I am going under Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I am going to blur it just a bit. I'm pressing V to return to my Move tool and sliding this down a bit. Now I want to change the opacity of this. I went into a little bit of the keyboard shortcuts earlier, but if you don't remember, if I simply press 8, it changes this layer's opacity to an 80%. 5, 50%, 6, 60%, 7, 70%, 0 to go back to 100. So I'm putting it back to 80, so it's slightly transparent. And now I'm going to go and add a little highlight to this rectangle as well, just so that we have another layer involved in this composition. And I'm clicking on the yellow square top layer. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I come down here and I either Option click on the Create New Layer or Alt click on Create New Layer, I can name the file and it will appear on top of the square. So I'm going to call this Highlight. I'm going to make a little rectangular selection. I am going to press Shift Delete because I want to make sure that I change my color to white. Preserve Transparency won't work here because it will fill nothing because everything is transparent. And then deselect by using Command D. Okay, so I've got these 3 layers that are creating this little button perhaps that I've made. Easy way to keep yourself organized is to group layers. Something to keep in mind. A lot of people use the panel menu and they choose New Group. That's a bad idea, and the reason why is because you will create a new empty folder and then you have to drag your items in and then they could lose their position. If you want to create a group of layers to keep things organized, you can select all 3 layers and then you can choose New Group from Layers. Name it and click OK. Now I'm going to undo this because I prefer to use a keyboard shortcut for this. I am pressing Command Z. I have all 3 selected and I can use Command G or Control G. Now, if I want to name these, I can just double click on Group 1 and I can call this button as well. And press Return after I rename. So, huge amount of benefits. I press V to move this. I can organized where I'm putting all 3 layers at once. Of course, you can still do this by shift-clicking and selecting multiple layers, but this is an easier method for doing that. I can also come in here and maybe I have 10 different layers in my group and I need to move them all to a new document. I can right-click, I can choose Duplicate Group, I can leave them in the same document, or I can put them in a new document, and I'll just click OK, and a new document is created with all those layers. Now, if I go to Bridge and I perhaps open up an image, and I come back, let me close this particular file and say Don't Save, come back to my original one, I right-click, Duplicate Group, you'll see that any other open files are also included, so I can click OK. And if I go back to Headset, you'll see that my group has been added to an existing file so that I can easily create a row of buttons or something else and keep all these files intact and together. Another benefit, I've got 10 layers and I need to change the transparency of all of them at once. Notice that I can select the group and I can change the opacity for all of them. Again, quick, easy way of working through this. Blending modes, I'm going to go into additional blending modes later, but just notice pass-through means that each one of these layers maintains its existing blending mode. So if I choose yellow square shadow and I have that on multiply, it will be maintained even though it's in the group. Okay, so I'm just going to close up this button group. And hopefully you've discovered some really helpful keyboard shortcuts that will help you when putting together your layered documents.